Hello, my name is James. Welcome to Sleep Stories World. Close your eyes and imagine an ocean so vast it covers nearly half our planet, where the deepest trenches plunge 7 miles below the surface, where islands are born from fire and whales sing songs that travel hundreds of miles through the water, where microscopic organisms produce the very oxygen you're breathing right now. Tonight, we journey across the Pacific, the world's largest ocean, exploring the ring of fire that crowns it, the currents that circle it, and the extraordinary life that fills it. This is a story grounded in science and wonder, crafted to guide you gently into deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the Pacific Ocean carry you into dreams. But first, let's prepare your space for rest. Ensure you're somewhere comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything, your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, please do so now. When you're ready, lie down and let yourself settle into your bed. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket as your body relaxes. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Your only task now is to be here, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand. Breathe out, feeling your body sink deeper into your bed. In and out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. Now, imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, carrying with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your chest. As you breathe out, imagine it spreading gently through your upper body. Breathe in, and let the light expand through your shoulders, your arms, your back. Breathe out, and feel it filling your stomach, your neck, your head, every space within you glowing softly. If a thought comes by, acknowledge it like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream, and then let it drift away. There will be time for those thoughts later. Now is for rest. On your next breath in, let the warm light travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, your knees. Breathe out and sense it flowing down to your ankles, to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Focus on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. If your mind wanders, simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey towards sleep. And now, Let us begin. Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of the world, where land gives way to an expanse so vast, so impossibly wide, that it defies the very limits of human comprehension. The Pacific Ocean stretches before you, a liquid realm that covers nearly half our planet's surface, 63 million square miles of shimmering blue that holds more water than all the rivers, lakes, and other oceans combined. This is not merely an ocean. This is the heart of our world, beating with currents that have flowed for millions of years, breathing with tides that move in rhythm with the moon itself. Tonight, we journey across these waters, not in haste, but with the gentle pace of clouds drifting across an endless sky. We explore the grandest ocean Earth has ever known, and the circle of fire that crowns it, a testament to the living, breathing planet beneath our feet. Let us begin where the ocean whispers its name. The word Pacific means peaceful, a name given by Ferdinand Magellan in 1521 when he emerged from the treacherous strait at the tip of South America into waters so calm, so tranquil, that after the tempests he had endured, it seemed like a gift from heaven itself. For 99 days, Magellan sailed these waters without encountering a single storm, and thus he named it Mar Pacifico, the peaceful sea. It was a moment of profound relief, a breath held and finally released, as his small fleet glided across glass-like waters under cloudless skies. How fitting, then, that we should visit this ocean now, in these quiet hours before sleep, when the world itself grows calm. The Pacific is ancient beyond measure. While the Atlantic Ocean is a relative newcomer in geological terms, a mere 180 million years old, the Pacific has existed for more than 700 million years. It was here before the dinosaurs walked the earth, before the continents took their present shapes, before the Himalayas rose to touch the sky. This ocean has witnessed the entire story of complex life on our planet, a silent observer to evolution's grand pageant. Beneath your feet, if you were to stand upon its deepest point, there would be nearly 7 miles of water. The Mariana Trench, in the western Pacific, plunges to a depth of 36,070 feet, deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you could place Earth's highest mountain into this trench, its peak would still be covered by more than a mile of water. Down in that profound darkness, the pressure is so immense, more than 8 tons per square inch, that it would instantly crush almost anything we know. And yet, even there, life persists. Pale, ghostly fish with bodies built to withstand the impossible, creatures that have never seen the sun, dwelling in perpetual night. The Pacific contains more than half of all the free water on Earth. To put this in perspective, if you were to gather all the water from every other ocean, every sea, every lake and river on the planet, the Pacific would still hold more. It is so vast that all 7 continents could fit within its boundaries with room to spare. From the Bering Strait in the frozen north to the icy waters surrounding Antarctica in the south, it spans almost halfway around the globe, a distance so great that dawn and dusk exist simultaneously upon its surface. Stand on the shore of California and look westward across the waves. The next land you would encounter, if you sailed in a straight line, might be Japan, more than 5,000 miles away. Or perhaps the Philippines, or Taiwan, or any of the thousands upon thousands of islands scattered like jewels across this blue immensity. The Pacific holds more than 25,000 islands, more than all other oceans combined, each one a world unto itself, born from the creative forces churning beneath the ocean floor. And it is beneath the floor that our story grows more wondrous still. For the Pacific rests atop not stillness, but movement. The ocean floor is not fixed and permanent, but rather a vast conveyor belt of rock, constantly being created and destroyed in a cycle that has continued for hundreds of millions of years. Along the East Pacific Rise, a massive underwater mountain range that runs from the Gulf of California to the waters off New Zealand, molten rock wells up from deep within the earth, creating new seafloor at a rate of several inches per year. This new rock, still warm from its fiery birth, slowly spreads outward, eventually being drawn back down into the planet's interior along the ocean's distant edges, where one plate slides beneath another in a process called subduction. This movement, so slow as to be imperceptible in a human lifetime, shapes everything. It builds mountains, creates islands, triggers earthquakes, and gives birth to volcanoes. And nowhere on Earth is this more dramatically visible than along the Ring of Fire, that horseshoe-shaped zone of geological fury that encircles the Pacific like a crown of flame. The Ring of Fire is not a single feature, but a 40,000-kilometer chain of subduction zones, volcanic arcs, and seismic fault lines that traces the Pacific's edges. It contains 75% of the world's active volcanoes, more than 450 mountains of fire, some sleeping quietly for now, others rumbling with barely contained energy. From the volcanoes of Kamchatka in Russia, down through Japan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, across to New Zealand, and up the western coasts of South America and North America to Alaska, this ring pulses with the deep heartbeat of our restless planet. 90% of the world's earthquakes occur along this boundary. The very ground trembles here more than anywhere else on Earth, as massive slabs of the planet's crust grind against one another, some diving deep into the mantle, others being thrust upward to create towering mountain ranges. The Andes, the Cascades, the coastal mountains of Japan, all are children of this great ring, born from the collision of oceanic and continental plates. And yet, for all this violence, for all this geological drama, the Pacific remains true to Magellan's naming. Its surface can be so calm, so perfectly still, that it reflects the sky like a mirror. Sailors have reported nights when the stars above and below were indistinguishable, when the boat seemed to float suspended between two infinite heavens. In the doldrums near the equator, winds can cease entirely for days, and the ocean becomes a vast plain of liquid glass, disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a fish rising to feed, or the distant exhalation of a whale. Imagine yourself there now, drifting on those tranquil waters, the boat rocking gently with the slow breathing of the sea. The sun has set, painting the western sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that deepen to indigo and finally to the black velvet of night. Stars emerge, one by one, then in clusters, then in their thousands and millions, until the entire dome of heaven is illuminated with points of ancient light. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of stars, and you realize that you are floating on one kind of cosmic ocean while gazing up at another. This is the magic of the Pacific, its ability to contain both the profound violence of creation and the deepest peace imaginable. It is fire and water, movement and stillness, ancient beyond comprehension yet perpetually young, constantly renewing itself through processes that have continued since before there were eyes to witness them. As you settle deeper into rest, let your mind drift across these waters. There is no hurry, no destination that must be reached. Like the currents that circle the Pacific in great gyres, the North Pacific, the South Pacific, moving in endless loops that take centuries to complete, we too can simply flow. Next, we will explore more of this magnificent realm. But for now, let the gentle rhythm of imagined waves carry you softward into the peaceful dark where dreams and ocean meet. The Pacific Ocean is never still. Even in its moments of greatest calm, when the surface lies smooth as polished stone. Beneath that tranquil veneer flows a network of currents, rivers within the sea, that move ceaselessly, carrying warmth and cold, nutrients and life, in patterns as reliable as the seasons themselves. These currents are the ocean's circulatory system, its bloodstream, moving vast quantities of water across thousands of miles in journeys that can take decades to complete. And like blood flowing through veins and arteries, these currents sustain life, distribute heat, and connect distant shores in ways both visible and invisible. Let us follow these liquid pathways, drifting with them as they circle the Great Basin of the Pacific. The North Pacific Gyre is one of the ocean's grandest features, a massive, clockwise rotation of water that encompasses millions of square miles. Driven by the prevailing winds and the Earth's rotation, this gyre moves in a slow, perpetual dance. The Kuroshio Current forms its western boundary, flowing northward past Japan like a river of warm tropical water, sometimes called the Black Current for its deep blue color. This current carries more water than all the rivers on Earth combined, some 30 million cubic meters per second, a flow so vast it defies easy comprehension. Imagine standing beside the Amazon River, the mightiest river on Earth, watching its brown waters surge toward the sea. Now imagine a current carrying 50 times that volume, sliding past the coast of Japan with quiet, unstoppable power. The Kuroshio is warm, sometimes reaching temperatures of 75 degrees Fahrenheit even in winter, and as it flows northward, it brings tropical warmth to temperate shores, moderating climates, sustaining fisheries, and creating habitats where tropical and temperate species mingle in unexpected ways. This warm current eventually becomes the North Pacific Current, spreading eastward across the ocean's expanse, a river without banks that can be 100 miles wide. It moves slowly, steadily, carrying floating debris, drifting seeds, and wandering creatures on journeys that might last for years. A piece of driftwood entering the Kuroshio off the Philippines might wash ashore in British Columbia a decade later, having traveled in a great arc across the world's largest ocean. Along the eastern edge of the Pacific, the California Current flows southward, carrying cold water from the Gulf of Alaska down past Oregon, California, and into Mexican waters. This current is rich with nutrients, stirred up from the deep by winds and the Earth's rotation through a process called upwelling. Where the California Current flows, life flourishes. Great schools of sardines and anchovies gather in silvery masses so dense they darken the water. Seabirds wheel and dive, their cries echoing across the waves. Sea lions bark from rocky outcrops, sleek and playful in the cold, rich waters. This is one of the most productive marine ecosystems on Earth, sustained entirely by the steady flow of the California Current and the nutrients it brings from the depths. But there is another current here, one that appears and disappears with mysterious regularity, transforming the Pacific in ways that ripple across the entire planet. This is El Niño, the child, named by Peruvian fishermen who noticed that every few years, around Christmas time, the cold coastal waters would suddenly warm and the fish would vanish. El Niño is not truly a current, but rather a vast reorganization of the Pacific's normal patterns. Every 2 to 7 years, the trade winds that normally blow from east to west across the tropical Pacific weaken or even reverse. When this happens, the warm water that has been piling up in the western Pacific, water that can be up to 24 inches higher in sea level than in the east, begins to flow back eastward. This warm water spreads across the ocean like a blanket, sometimes extending all the way to the coast of South America. The effects are profound and far-reaching. In the western Pacific, the warm water that normally sustains monsoon rains moves away, bringing drought to Indonesia, Australia, and the Philippines. In the eastern Pacific, the warm water disrupts the cold, nutrient-rich upwelling, causing fish populations to plummet. But it also brings rain, sometimes torrential rain, to normally dry regions. Deserts bloom. Rivers flood. Weather patterns shift across the globe. North America experiences milder winters. Hurricanes become more frequent in the Pacific, but less common in the Atlantic. It is as if the entire Earth's climate system has been nudged into a different configuration, all because of changes in the Pacific circulation. The El Niño of 1997 to 1998 was one of the strongest ever recorded. Sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific rose by up to 9 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. Coral reefs bleached white as the warm water stressed their symbiotic algae. Floods devastated Peru and Ecuador. Droughts sparked wildfires across Indonesia. The global economic impact was estimated at $35 billion. And yet, within a year, the Pacific had returned to its normal state, the warm water retreating westward, the cold currents resuming their flow, as if the ocean had simply been taking a deep breath before settling back into its ancient rhythm. The counterpart to El Niño is La Niña, the girl, when the trade winds blow even stronger than usual, pushing warm water far to the west and bringing extremely cold water to the surface in the east. La Niña tends to bring opposite effects: wetter conditions in the western Pacific, drier in the east, more Atlantic hurricanes, colder winters in North America. Together, El Niño and La Niña form what scientists call the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, the Pacific's great breathing cycle, inhaling and exhaling over a period of years, each breath reshaping weather patterns across half the planet. Deeper still, beneath the surface currents, flows another circulation system, the thermohaline current, sometimes called the Great Ocean Conveyor Belt. This current is driven not by wind, but by differences in water temperature and salinity. Cold, salty water is dense and heavy, and in certain places, particularly in the North Atlantic, this dense water sinks to the ocean floor and begins a slow journey southward. This deep water eventually finds its way into the Pacific, where it rises again to the surface in a process that can take 1,000 years to complete. One drop of water sinking in the North Atlantic today might not see sunlight again until the year 3000, emerging in the North Pacific having traveled along the ocean floor for a millennium. This deep circulation is crucial to regulating Earth's climate, distributing heat around the globe, storing carbon dioxide in the deep ocean, and maintaining the chemical balance of the seas. It is the slowest of all currents, imperceptible to any observer, yet its influence extends across centuries and continents. Near the equator, the Pacific's currents create another remarkable feature, the Pacific Equatorial Undercurrent, also known as the Cromwell Current. While surface waters near the equator flow westward, driven by the trade winds, beneath them flows a powerful eastward current, moving in the opposite direction at depths of 100 to 300 feet. This subsurface river was unknown to science until the 1950s, despite being one of the Pacific's strongest currents, carrying more than 30 million cubic meters of water per second. It flows in perpetual darkness, never seeing the sun, a secret highway beneath the waves. The discovery of the Cromwell Current reminded scientists how much remains unknown about the ocean, even today. The Pacific is so vast, so deep, that new features are still being discovered, new patterns recognized, new connections understood. Every expedition into these waters reveals something unexpected, some piece of the puzzle that helps us comprehend the magnificent complexity of this living system. As these currents flow, they carry with them the seeds of life, microscopic plankton drifting in vast blooms, larvae of fish and crustaceans dispersing to distant shores, nutrient cycling from deep to shallow waters and back again. The currents connect ecosystems separated by thousands of miles, ensuring that the Pacific is not a collection of isolated habitats but a single, integrated whole, where events in one region eventually influence conditions half an ocean away. Close your eyes now, and imagine yourself floating in these waters, not struggling against the current, but surrendering to it, allowing it to carry you gently, effortlessly, in its ancient circular path. There is no resistance here, no need to swim or strive. The current knows where it is going. It has been flowing this path for millennia, long before you were born, and it will continue long after you have gone. You are simply a passenger, drifting in the embrace of something far larger and older than yourself. The water is warm where the Kuroshio carries you northward, a tropical warmth that relaxes your muscles, that soothes away the tensions of the day. And as you drift, the stars will slowly overhead, marking the passage of hours that feel like moments, moments that stretch into timelessness. In the middle of the Pacific, far from any continent, rise islands that were not always there. These are not fragments broken off from larger landmasses, not the remnants of some ancient supercontinent torn apart by tectonic forces. No, these islands are something more extraordinary still. They are mountains built from nothing, constructed molecule by molecule, eruption by eruption, rising from the abyssal depths until they break the surface and stand against the sky. They are born of fire, children of the ring, and their story is one of the most remarkable in all of geology. The Hawaiian Islands stretch across 1,500 miles of ocean, a chain of volcanic peaks that grows progressively older as you travel from southeast to northwest. The Big Island of Hawaii, at the southeastern end, is the youngest, less than 500,000 years old, and it is still growing. Even now, as you rest here in the quiet darkness, lava flows from Kalor and Mauna Loa, adding new land to the island shores, creating earth where moments before there was only sea. But travel northwest along the chain, to Maui, then Oahu, then Kauai, and the islands grow older. Kauai, the northernmost of the main Hawaiian islands, is approximately 5 million years old. Its volcanic fires long extinct, its once sharp peaks worn smooth by millions of years of rain and wind. Continue further northwest, beyond the main islands, and you encounter the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, tiny atolls and submerged seamounts that were once towering volcanoes but have gradually subsided back beneath the waves as the oceanic crust beneath them cooled and sank. This progression reveals a profound truth. The islands are moving. Or rather, the Pacific plate upon which they sit is moving, sliding northwestward over a stationary hotspot deep within the Earth's mantle at a rate of approximately 3 inches per year, about as fast as your fingernails grow. Imagine a blowtorch held beneath a sheet of metal that is slowly being pulled across it. The torch stays in one place, but the metal moves, and as it does, the torch burns a series of holes in a line. This is essentially what happens in the Pacific. Deep beneath the ocean floor, perhaps 1,800 miles down in the Earth's mantle, sits a plume of exceptionally hot rock. This Hawaiian hotspot has remained in roughly the same position for at least 70 million years, while the Pacific plate slides over it, and as it does, the hotspot melts through the plate, creating volcanoes. A volcano forms, grows, erupts for perhaps 1 million years, building a massive mountain that eventually breaks the surface to become an island. But the plate keeps moving, carrying the volcano away from its source of magma. The eruptions cease. The volcano becomes dormant, then extinct. Meanwhile, a new volcano has begun forming over the hotspot, and the process continues. The result is a chain of islands, each one a fossil footprint marking where the hotspot was relative to the moving plate, creating a timeline written in volcanic rock that stretches back tens of millions of years. Mauna Kea, the highest peak on the Big Island of Hawaii, rises 13,796 feet above sea level. But this measures only the portion above water. From its base on the ocean floor to its summit, Mauna Kea stands more than 33,000 feet tall, taller than Mount Everest, making it the tallest mountain on Earth when measured from base to peak. It is a single volcanic edifice, built entirely from lava flows, layer upon layer, eruption after eruption, grain by grain, until it became the highest point in the Pacific. The volume of Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea's neighbor, is even more staggering. This single volcano contains approximately 19,000 cubic miles of rock, enough material to bury the entire state of Texas under a layer of lava more than 400 feet deep. And all of it came from that single point in the mantle, that hotspot burning its way through the Pacific Plate generation after generation. But Hawaii is not the only hotspot in the Pacific. Far to the south, nearly at the center of the Great Ocean, lies the Society Island hotspot, which created Tahiti, Moorea, and Bora Bora. To the southeast, another hotspot gave birth to Easter Island, Rapa Nui, that lonely speck of land more than 2,000 miles from the nearest continent, one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. The Galapagos Islands, straddling the equator off the coast of South America, are built on yet another hotspot, one that has been active for perhaps 20 million years. Each of these hotspots operates on geological timescales that dwarf human comprehension, patiently building islands that will stand for millions of years before erosion and subsidence return them to the sea. The Emperor Seamounts, a chain of underwater mountains extending north from the Hawaiian Islands, are the ancient ancestors of the current islands, volcanoes that formed 70 to 80 million years ago during the age of dinosaurs, and have since been carried so far from their source that they have eroded away and sunk beneath the waves. They exist now as memories in stone, ghostly mountains in the deep, covered by sediment and coral, visited only by submersibles and the strange creatures that inhabit the abyssal plains. The Pacific contains more than 10,000 seamounts, underwater mountains that rise at least 3,000 feet from the ocean floor. Most are extinct volcanoes, the stumps of islands that once were. Some are geos, seamounts with flat tops that were eroded by wave action when they stood as islands, then subsided beneath the sea as the crust beneath them cooled and sank. These flat-top mountains now lie hundreds or even thousands of feet below the surface, yet their flattened summits still bear the marks of ancient waves, frozen in stone like photographs from an unimaginably distant past. When a volcanic island begins to sink, something remarkable often happens. Coral reefs that once fringed the island shores continue to grow upward, trying to stay in the sunlit waters near the surface. As the island slowly subsides, the reef keeps pace, building upward at roughly the same rate the island sinks. Eventually, the volcanic peak disappears entirely beneath the waves, but the reef remains, a ring of coral surrounding a lagoon where the mountain once stood. This is how atolls are formed, those ring-shaped islands scattered throughout the tropical Pacific, each one a memorial to a vanished volcano. Charles Darwin, during his voyage on the HMS Beagle in the 1830s, was the first to propose this explanation for atolls, though he had no knowledge of plate tectonics or hotspots. He simply observed the sequence: volcanic island with fringing reef, then partially submerged island with barrier reef, then atoll with no central island, and deduced that islands must be sinking. It was one of his most brilliant insights, confirmed more than a century later when deep drilling through atolls revealed volcanic rock beneath thousands of feet of coral, exactly as his theory predicted. The Pacific atolls are home to some of Earth's most pristine coral reefs, gardens of extraordinary beauty and complexity growing in the middle of the ocean, hundreds of miles from any continent. The Tuamotu archipelago in French Polynesia contains 78 atolls, a constellation of coral rings scattered across 1,000,000 square miles of ocean. Each atoll is a complete ecosystem, a world unto itself, where coconut palms shade white sand beaches, where the lagoon shimmers in shades of turquoise and jade, where the reef drops away into the blue void, and where the night sky, undimmed by any artificial light, reveals the full glory of the cosmos. To stand on such an atoll at night is to feel both infinitesimally small and intimately connected to the universe. The coral beneath your feet grew from the skeleton of a volcano born in fire, fed by a plume of molten rock rising from the very edge of the Earth's core. The island itself is a temporary creation, a brief emergence of stone in the vast liquid expanse of the Pacific, destined to sink back into the depths from which it came. And yet, for this moment, this geological instant, it exists, a place where land and sea and sky converge, where life has found purchase in the middle of the greatest ocean, defying the emptiness with its extravagant persistence. Lie back now, on an imagined beach of coral sand, still warm from the tropical sun. The waves lap gently at the shore, their rhythm as steady as breathing, as ancient as the tides themselves. Above you, the stars blaze in their multitudes, and you can see the Milky Way arching overhead, that river of distant suns, while beneath you, buried deep below the coral and the sand, lies the volcanic heart of the island, silent now, its fires long since extinguished, but its presence still felt in the very ground upon which you rest. The sound of the waves becomes a lullaby, each gentle surge and retreat marking the passage of time in moments too small to count, too perfect to measure. The islands born of hotspots are gentle builders, constructing their mountains slowly, methodically, through countless small eruptions spread across millions of years. But along the Ring of Fire, where the Pacific Plate collides with the continental plates that surround it, the volcanism is of an entirely different character, more violent, more explosive, more dramatic in its fury. These are not the patient shield volcanoes of Hawaii, with their rivers of flowing lava. These are stratovolcanoes, steep-sided mountains built from layers of ash, lava, and debris. Volcanoes that can sleep peacefully for centuries before awakening with cataclysmic force. Mount Fuji rises 12,388 feet above the Japanese landscape, a nearly perfect cone of volcanic symmetry that has become the soul of a nation. For centuries, poets have written of its snow-capped peak, artists have painted its graceful slopes, pilgrims have climbed its flanks seeking spiritual enlightenment. It appears serene, timeless, eternal, a mountain that seems to embody permanence itself. Yet Fuji is not dormant. It is merely resting. The last time it erupted was in 1707, an event known as the Hoei eruption, when the volcano ejected nearly half a cubic mile of volcanic material into the atmosphere. Ash fell on Tokyo, 60 miles away, accumulating several inches deep, turning day into twilight. Rivers of pumice flowed down the mountain's sides. The sky thundered with volcanic lightning, brilliant electrical discharges that flickered through the ash clouds like veins of fire. And then, after 16 days, the eruption ceased, and Fuji returned to silence. That was more than 300 years ago. The volcano has shown no signs of major activity since. But beneath that elegant cone, magma still churns, still rises slowly from the subduction zone where the Philippine Sea plate slides beneath Japan at a rate of about 3 inches per year. Scientists estimate that Fuji's magma chamber currently holds approximately 53 million cubic feet of molten rock. The question is not whether it will erupt again, but when. Japan sits at one of the most geologically active locations on Earth, where 4 tectonic plates converge. The Pacific, Philippine Sea, Eurasian, and North American plates all meet in this region, grinding against one another in a complex dance of subduction and collision. The result is a nation built on volcanism and shaped by earthquakes, where the very ground is alive with movement. Japan experiences approximately 1,500 earthquakes every year that are strong enough to be felt, more than 4 every single day, though most are minor tremors that cause nothing more than a gentle rattling of teacups. But some are not minor. On March 11, 2011, the Pacific Plate suddenly lurched beneath the North American Plate off Japan's northeastern coast, releasing energy equivalent to approximately 23,000 atomic bombs. The earthquake measured magnitude 9.1, the 4th most powerful earthquake ever recorded, and it lasted for 6 minutes, an eternity of shaking that seemed as if it might never end. The seafloor moved as much as 160 feet horizontally and up to 30 feet vertically in places. The entire island of Honshu shifted 8 feet to the east. The Earth's axis tilted by nearly 4 inches, and the length of the day shortened by 1.8 microseconds because of the redistribution of the planet's mass. The earthquake was devastating, but what followed was worse. The movement of the seafloor displaced an enormous volume of water, creating a tsunami. A series of waves that radiated outward from the epicenter at speeds approaching 500 miles per hour. In the open ocean, these waves were barely noticeable, perhaps only a foot or 2 high, but as they approached the Japanese coast and the water shallowed, they grew taller and taller, some reaching heights of over 130 feet. The waves swept inland, in some places traveling as far as 6 miles from the coast, carrying away entire towns, flooding the Fukushima nuclear power plant, and claiming more than 18,000 lives. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake was a stark reminder of the immense forces at work along the Ring of Fire. But it was not unprecedented. In 1960, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded struck off the coast of Chile, magnitude 9.5, releasing twice the energy of the Tohoku event. The earthquake ruptured a section of the Nazca Plate approximately 600 miles long, causing massive tsunamis that radiated across the entire Pacific. The waves reached Hawaii 15 hours later, still powerful enough to cause damage. 22 hours after the earthquake, they struck Japan, 6,000 miles away, with waves up to 15 feet high. The Pacific had become a vast pool into which a stone had been dropped, and the ripples had spread to every shore. These earthquakes occur because the Pacific Plate is being consumed. Along the western edge of the ocean, the plate dives beneath Asia and the islands of the western Pacific, descending into the mantle at angles of 30 to 60 degrees. As it descends, it carries with it water trapped in sediments and within the crystalline structure of minerals. When this water-laden rock reaches depths of about 60 miles and temperatures of around 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, the water is released, lowering the melting point of the surrounding mantle rock. Magma forms, and because it is less dense than the surrounding rock, it begins to rise. This magma eventually reaches the surface, erupting to create chains of volcanoes parallel to the subduction zones. These volcanic arcs are among the most dramatic features of the Ring of Fire. The Aleutian Islands stretching from Alaska toward Russia, the Kamchatka Peninsula with its 29 active volcanoes, the Japanese archipelago, the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and New Zealand. Each is a consequence of subduction, each fed by the melting of oceanic crust as it descends into the earth. Indonesia alone contains 127 active volcanoes, more than any other nation on Earth. The islands of Java, Sumatra, Bali, and their neighbors are built almost entirely from volcanic material, layer upon layer of ash and lava accumulated over millions of years. Some of these volcanoes have shaped human history in profound ways. In 1815, Mount Tambora on the island of Sumbawa erupted with a force perhaps 4 times greater than any volcanic eruption in recorded history. The explosion ejected approximately 36 cubic miles of rock, ash, and pumice into the atmosphere, enough material to bury the entire state of Rhode Island under a layer more than 300 feet deep. The sound of the eruption was heard nearly 2,000 miles away. Ash fell as far as 800 miles from the volcano, in some places accumulating to depths of more than 3 feet. Pyroclastic flows, avalanches of superheated gas and rock traveling at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour, swept down the mountain slopes, incinerating everything in their path. The immediate death toll from the eruption and its tsunamis was approximately 71,000 people. But Tambora's influence extended far beyond Indonesia. The enormous quantity of sulfur dioxide ejected into the stratosphere formed a veil that encircled the globe, reflecting sunlight back into space and cooling the Earth's surface. The year 1816 became known as the year without a summer. Temperatures dropped worldwide. Crops failed across Europe and North America. Snow fell in June in New England. Famine spread across the Northern Hemisphere. An estimated 100,000 additional people died from starvation and disease in the years following the eruption. One volcano, erupting for a few days on a distant Indonesian island, had altered the climate of the entire planet. Yet Tambora was not even the largest eruption in the Pacific's recorded history. In 1883, Krakatoa, a volcanic island in the strait between Java and Sumatra, exploded with such violence that 2/3 of the island simply disappeared, blasted into the atmosphere or collapsed into the empty magma chamber below. The explosion was heard 3,000 miles away, the loudest sound in recorded history. The pressure wave from the eruption circled the globe 7 times over the course of 5 days, detectable on barometers as far away as England. Tsunamis up to 120 feet high devastated the coastlines of Java and Sumatra, killing more than 36,000 people. The sky turned red around the world for months afterward, as volcanic aerosols scattered sunlight in unprecedented ways, creating sunsets so vivid and unusual that they inspired countless paintings and poems. The Pacific's volcanoes operate on timescales both swift and slow. They can sleep for centuries, lulling nearby populations into complacency before awakening without warning. Or they can rumble constantly, providing daily reminders of the restless earth beneath. Mount Yeja, on the island of Tanah in Vanuatu, has been in a state of nearly continuous eruption for at least 800 years, perhaps much longer. Travelers and explorers have reported seeing its glow from the sea for centuries, a beacon of fire visible for miles, a lighthouse built not by human hands but by the earth itself. These volcanoes are not aberrations or anomalies. They are the natural and inevitable consequence of plate tectonics, of a planet that is geologically alive, constantly recycling its crust, constantly renewing itself through fire. The Ring of Fire is not a threat to be feared, but a process to be understood. The Earth's way of releasing internal heat, of creating new land, of shaping and reshaping the surface of our world. Rest now in the knowledge that even the most violent eruptions, the most powerful earthquakes, are part of a cycle far older than humanity, a rhythm that has pulsed through the Earth for billions of years. The Pacific Plate continues its slow journey westward and downward. The magma continues to rise, the volcanoes continue to build and sometimes to destroy, and through it all, the ocean abides, accepting what fire creates and what time erodes, patient and eternal in its vastness. The sound of distant waves reaches you across the darkness, a gentle reminder that even in fire, there is water, even in violence. There is peace, even in destruction. There is creation. Where the Pacific Plate meets its end, where it bends downward and begins its long descent back into the Earth's interior, the ocean floor does not slope gently into darkness. Instead, it plunges dramatically, precipitously, into trenches so deep that they define the very limits of our planet's surface. These are the deepest places on Earth, chasms that descend farther below sea level than any mountain rises above it, realms of perpetual darkness and crushing pressure where the rules of life as we know it seem not to apply. Yet even here, in these most extreme environments, life persists, adapted in ways that challenge our understanding of what is possible. The Mariana Trench, in the western Pacific east of the Philippines, is the deepest of all oceanic trenches. At its lowest point, a depression called Challenger Deep, the ocean floor lies 36,070 feet below the surface, nearly 7 miles down. If you could place Mount Everest at the bottom of this trench, its summit would still be covered by more than a mile of water. The trench itself is approximately 1,580 miles long and 43 miles wide on average, a vast scar in the seafloor marking where the Pacific Plate dives beneath the smaller Mariana Plate. The pressure at the bottom of Challenger Deep is almost incomprehensible, approximately 16,000 pounds per square inch, more than 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. This is equivalent to having 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of every square inch of your body. At such pressures, air-filled spaces collapse instantly. Wood becomes waterlogged and sinks. Even steel spheres will compress measurably. The human body, if somehow transported to these depths without protection, would not be crushed in the dramatic way often depicted in fiction. Our bodies are mostly water, which is incompressible, but the air spaces in our lungs, ears, and sinuses would collapse, and we would die within seconds. And yet, when explorers finally reached the bottom of Challenger Deep in 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh in the bathyscaphe Trieste, they reported seeing a flatfish and a shrimp through their small porthole. Life existed even here, in the deepest place on Earth, in complete darkness and under unimaginable pressure. Since then, submersibles and remote vehicles have discovered entire ecosystems in the trenches. Translucent amphipods the size of dinner plates, snailfish with bodies so gelatinous they seem almost liquid, sea cucumbers creeping across the sediment, and bacterial mats that process chemicals seeping from the Earth's crust. The Mariana Trench is not alone. The Pacific is ringed with trenches, each one a subduction zone where oceanic crust returns to the mantle. The Tonga Trench, in the southwestern Pacific, reaches depths of 35,702 feet. The Philippine Trench descends to 34,580 feet. The Kermadec Trench, the Japan Trench, the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, each plunges more than 5 miles deep, creating a series of profound chasms that encircle the Pacific like a necklace of voids. These trenches are not static features. They are active zones of geological transformation where the oldest parts of the Pacific seafloor, some sections dating back 180 million years to the Jurassic period, are being consumed and recycled. The oceanic crust, having traveled thousands of miles from the mid-ocean ridges where it was born, arrives at last at these trenches, cold and dense, and begins its final journey downward into the mantle. The angle of descent varies. Some plates slide beneath their neighbors at shallow angles of 15 to 20 degrees, while others plunge nearly vertically, but all share the same ultimate fate: dissolution and rebirth as the rock melts and eventually rises again as magma. The deepest point ever reached by human beings in a manned submersible is in the Mariana Trench, when filmmaker James Cameron descended to Challenger Deep in 2012 aboard the Deep Sea Challenger. The journey down took 2 hours and 36 minutes, a slow descent through progressively darker and colder water. Sunlight disappears entirely by about 3,300 feet, the edge of what oceanographers call the midnight zone. Beyond this depth, the only light comes from bioluminescence, the cold glow produced by living creatures themselves. Cameron reported a landscape unlike anywhere else on Earth. Fine sediment covering gentle slopes, utterly devoid of color in the lights of his submersible, everything rendered in shades of gray and brown. The temperature hovered just above freezing at 34.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The silence was complete except for the creaking of his vessel under pressure and the hum of its systems. He collected samples, filmed the alien landscape, and spent 3 hours at the bottom of the world before beginning the ascent. The return journey took just 70 minutes, as his craft released its ballast weights and rose like a bubble through the water column. What Cameron and other explorers have found in the trenches has revolutionized our understanding of life's limits. In 2017, scientists studying samples from the Mariana Trench discovered microbial communities living in sediment cores from depths exceeding 32,000 feet. Organisms thriving in an environment of extreme pressure, near freezing temperatures, and complete darkness, feeding on organic material that drifts down from the sunlit surface miles above. These microbes have metabolic rates incredibly slow compared to surface organisms, existing in a kind of geological time, where processes that might take hours or days in surface environments unfold over weeks or months. Perhaps most remarkably, scientists have also discovered amphipods, small crustaceans resembling shrimp, at depths of more than 34,000 feet in several Pacific trenches. These creatures, called Hirondelia gigas, have bodies adapted in extraordinary ways to their extreme environment. Their cells contain high concentrations of a chemical called piezolites that helps protect their proteins from being deformed by pressure. Their bodies are filled with lipids that remain fluid even under crushing pressure and near freezing temperatures. They feed on the detritus that sinks from above, the marine snow of dead plankton, fecal matter, and organic debris that drifts endlessly downward through the water column. The fact that these amphipods can thrive at such depths raises profound questions about the nature of life itself. If organisms can adapt to pressures exceeding 8 tons per square inch, to environments with no light and minimal food, might life exist in equally extreme environments on other worlds? The ice-covered ocean of Jupiter's moon Europa, the subsurface seas of Saturn's moon Enceladus, if the trenches of the Pacific can support life, perhaps these distant oceans can as well. The trenches also serve as traps for some of humanity's most persistent pollutants. In 2017, scientists discovered that amphipods collected from the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench contained high levels of polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and other man-made chemicals that were banned decades ago. These compounds, released into the environment thousands of miles away and many years in the past, had somehow made their way to the most remote location on Earth, attached to particles that drifted down through the water column, settling in the trench sediments and entering the food chain. Even here, in the deepest, most isolated ecosystem on the planet, human influence has reached. Yet for all we have learned, the trenches remain largely unexplored. More people have walked on the moon than have descended to Challenger Deep. The trenches represent more than 90% of the ocean's hadal zone, environments deeper than 20,000 feet, and we have visited less than 1% of this vast realm. There are seamounts down there that have never been mapped, species that have never been seen, geological processes we have yet to observe. The Pacific's trenches are among the last true frontiers on Earth, places where discovery still awaits. As you sink deeper into rest, imagine yourself descending through these waters, not in fear of the darkness, but in wonder at it. The pressure around you feels not crushing but embracing, like a gentle weight that holds you suspended between surface and seafloor. The darkness is not empty but full of possibilities, of creatures you cannot see but know are there, adapted to this realm in ways that transcend your understanding. Down, down you drift, past the midnight zone where the last photons of sunlight surrender to darkness, past the abyssal plains where strange fish hover motionless in the current, past the seamounts crowned with ancient coral, down to where the seafloor begins its steep descent into the trench, where the earth opens to reveal its depths. And there, in that profound darkness, in that silence beyond silence, you find not fear but peace. The peace of knowing that life persists even here, that adaptation and resilience extend to the very limits of what is possible, that there is no place so extreme, no environment so hostile, that existence cannot find a way. The weight of water above you becomes the weight of blankets, warm and comforting, holding you safely as you drift in the gentle current of dreams. The Pacific is not merely a body of water, vast and deep. It is a highway, a network of invisible roads traveled by creatures great and small, following paths worn smooth by countless generations, navigating by senses we are only beginning to understand. These migrations span thousands of miles, connecting distant shores, linking ecosystems separated by the breadth of the world's largest ocean. To witness these journeys is to see the Pacific not as an obstacle, but as a home, a realm through which life flows in great seasonal cycles, as predictable as the tides, as ancient as the ocean itself. Each year, gray whales undertake one of the longest migrations of any mammal on Earth. They travel approximately 12,000 miles round-trip from their feeding grounds in the cold, nutrient-rich waters of the Bering Sea and Arctic Ocean to the warm lagoons of Baja California, Mexico, where they give birth to their calves. The journey south takes 2 to 3 months, the whales traveling day and night, averaging about 75 miles per day, barely stopping to rest or feed. These whales navigate along the coastline, following the continental shelf, their bodies oriented to the contours of the land that lies just beyond the surf. Mothers and calves travel together, the young learning the route that they will follow for the rest of their lives. When they reach the shallow lagoons of Baja, places like San Ignacio, Magdalena Bay, and Guerrero Negro, the pregnant females give birth in waters warm and protected, where their newborn calves can nurse and grow strong before the long journey back to the Arctic begins in spring. A gray whale calf at birth weighs approximately 1,500 pounds and measures about 15 feet long. For the next 2 to 3 months, it will nurse on milk that is 53% fat, extraordinarily rich compared to cow's milk at 4% fat, gaining as much as 60 to 70 pounds per day. By the time mother and calf begin the northward migration, the calf will have doubled in size and weight, strong enough to make the journey to the Arctic feeding grounds, though even so, the swim will test it to its limits. But whales are not the only navigators of the Pacific's vastness. Leatherback sea turtles, the largest of all living turtles, cross the entire breadth of the ocean in journeys that can exceed 12,000 miles. These ancient mariners, relatives of species that swam in Jurassic seas, nest on tropical beaches in Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. After laying their eggs in the warm sand, the females return to the ocean and swim eastward across the Pacific, all the way to the cold waters off California, Oregon, and even Alaska, following the California current to feeding grounds rich with jellyfish, their primary food. A single leatherback can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and measure 7 feet in length. Unlike other sea turtles, they lack a hard shell, instead having a leathery carapace composed of tough, oil-saturated connective tissue. This flexibility allows them to dive to extraordinary depths. The deepest recorded dive for a leatherback is 4,200 feet, deeper than any other turtle species can reach, where they hunt jellyfish in the dim twilight of the mesopelagic zone. These turtles navigate using Earth's magnetic field, detecting subtle variations in magnetic intensity and inclination that create a kind of magnetic map of the ocean. Scientists believe that when leatherback hatchlings first scramble from their nests to the sea, they imprint on the magnetic signature of their birthplace, storing this information in their brains. Decades later, when they are ready to reproduce, they use this magnetic memory to find their way back across thousands of miles of featureless ocean to the very same beach where they were born, completing a circle that can span 30 years or more. The Pacific salmon perform perhaps the most poignant migration of all. Born in freshwater streams and rivers across the North Pacific Rim, from California to Alaska, from Russia to Japan, young salmon spend their first months or years in freshwater before undergoing a remarkable transformation called smoltification. Their bodies change, adapting to salt water, and they swim downstream to the ocean, entering a realm vastly larger and more abundant than the streams of their birth. For 1 to 5 years, depending on the species, these salmon roam the North Pacific, feeding voraciously on krill, small fish, and squid, growing from fingerlings weighing mere ounces to adults weighing 20 pounds or more. Sockeye salmon from rivers in British Columbia have been tracked traveling as far as 2,500 miles offshore into the Central Pacific. Chinook salmon from California rivers range across vast areas of the ocean, following currents and concentrations of prey, building the strength and mass they will need for the journey ahead. Then, when their bodies signal that the time has come, they turn toward home. No one fully understands how they navigate back to their natal streams, whether by magnetic sense, by detecting chemical signatures in the water, by memory of the stars, or by some combination of all these. But their precision is extraordinary. A salmon born in a small tributary of the Columbia River will return, years later and thousands of miles traveled, to that exact same tributary, swimming past countless other streams that must seem identical, yet choosing unerringly the one that calls to it. The return journey is an ordeal that defies easy comprehension. Salmon stop feeding once they enter fresh water, surviving entirely on the fat and protein stored in their bodies. They swim against powerful currents, leap up waterfalls, navigate through rapids, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles upstream. Their bodies begin to deteriorate, scales become dull, flesh softens, organs fail, yet still they swim, driven by an imperative older than consciousness itself. When they reach their spawning grounds, females dig nests in the gravel with their tails, depositing thousands of eggs that males fertilize. And then, their purpose fulfilled, they die. Every Pacific salmon that spawns dies afterward, some within hours, some within days, and their bodies, rich with nutrients from the ocean, feed the very ecosystem that nurtured them as juveniles. Bears, eagles, and other predators feast on the dying salmon, carrying their remains into the forest, where the nutrients from the ocean, nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon, fertilize trees that may stand hundreds of feet from the stream. Scientists have found that a significant percentage of the nitrogen in trees growing near salmon streams comes from the ocean, transported there in the bodies of salmon who made the ultimate sacrifice for the next generation. Perhaps the most mysterious navigators of the Pacific are the bar-tailed godwits, slender shorebirds that accomplish what may be the most extreme non-stop flight of any bird on Earth. These godwits breed during the brief Arctic summer on the tundra of Alaska, feeding on insects and building up fat reserves. Then, in autumn, they depart on a migration that seems to defy the very laws of endurance. Flying without stopping, without eating, without sleeping, bar-tailed godwits travel from Alaska to New Zealand, a distance of approximately 7,000 miles, in a single continuous flight lasting 8 to 9 days. They fly over the open Pacific, far from any land, navigating by mechanisms still not fully understood, burning through the fat reserves they accumulated in the Arctic. A godwit tracked in 2020 flew 7,581 miles non-stop in just over 11 days, setting a new record for avian endurance. To accomplish this feat, godwits undergo remarkable physiological changes before migration. They shrink their digestive organs, which they will not need during flight, and transfer that protein to their flight muscles. Their bodies become almost entirely composed of fuel and engine, fat for energy, muscle for flight, with everything else reduced to the minimum. During the flight, they burn approximately half their body weight, arriving in New Zealand exhausted and emaciated, but alive, having crossed half the Pacific without once touching land or sea. The Pacific also hosts the longest migration of any animal on Earth. The Arctic tern, a seabird that nests in the Arctic during the northern summer, then flies to Antarctica for the southern summer, experiencing 2 summers each year and more daylight than any other creature. While terns from other oceans follow the Atlantic or Indian Ocean routes, those from the Pacific side of the Arctic cross the vast ocean, sometimes traveling more than 50,000 miles in a single year, a distance equivalent to more than twice around the Earth at the equator. These migrations, repeated year after year, generation after generation, create invisible threads connecting distant parts of the Pacific. A whale born in Baja carries nutrients from Arctic waters back to Mexican lagoons. A salmon born in Alaska feeds forests in the Pacific Northwest with nitrogen from the open ocean. A turtle hatched in Indonesia brings energy from California jellyfish blooms back to tropical beaches. The ocean is not divided into separate compartments, but is a single, integrated system where life flows in great circles, where everything is connected to everything else across distances that humble the human scale. As you rest now, imagine yourself joining these migrations, not struggling against the current, but moving with it, carried on journeys older than memory, following paths written in the genes and learned through generations. Feel the pull of distant shores, the call of home across thousands of miles of water, the deep knowing that guides creatures to places they have never seen but somehow recognize. You are swimming with the whales in their slow, steady progress along the coast, flying with the godwits high above the waves, the ocean spread below you like hammered silver, drifting with the turtles in the deep blue, following magnetic lines invisible to the eye but felt in the very fabric of your being. And in this movement, this ancient flowing of life across the Pacific, you find your own journey into sleep, a migration from waking to dreaming, from consciousness to rest, guided by instincts deeper than thought, more ancient than words, as natural and necessary as the turning of whales toward their breeding grounds, the flight of birds across impossible distances, the return of salmon to the streams of their birth. Let go now, and let the current carry you home. As our journey across the Pacific draws toward its close, we turn our attention not to the dramatic, not to volcanoes or earthquakes or epic migrations, but to something more fundamental still. We look to the smallest inhabitants of this vast ocean, the microscopic foundation upon which all else depends, and to the intricate web of life that connects surface to seafloor, sunlight to darkness, predator to prey, in a system of such complexity and beauty that we are only beginning to comprehend its full magnificence. For the Pacific is not merely water and stone. It is alive, teeming with organisms from the smallest bacteria to the largest animals ever to exist on Earth, all interdependent, all necessary, all part of a story that has been unfolding for hundreds of millions of years. At the base of it all is phytoplankton, microscopic organisms that drift in the sunlit surface waters, most too small to see with the naked eye, yet collectively more important to life on Earth than all the rainforests combined. These tiny organisms, primarily single-celled algae and cyanobacteria, perform photosynthesis just as land plants do, using sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients to create organic matter. In the process, they produce approximately 50% of all the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere. Every second breath you take comes from phytoplankton, most of it from the world's oceans. The Pacific alone produces roughly 1/3 of the planet's oxygen through phytoplankton photosynthesis. Each spring and summer, when increased sunlight and upwelling nutrients create ideal conditions, phytoplankton bloom in vast numbers, sometimes creating patches of color visible from space, swirls of green and blue-green that can span hundreds of miles. These blooms form the foundation of the marine food web. Tiny zooplankton, copepods, krill larvae, and countless other organisms graze on the phytoplankton. Small fish eat the zooplankton. Larger fish eat the smaller fish. Sharks, tuna, and marine mammals feed on the larger fish. And so the energy captured from sunlight by microscopic cells flows upward through the ecosystem, sustaining life at every level. Antarctic krill, though named for southern waters, have Pacific relatives that form enormous swarms in the ocean's productive zones. A single krill swarm can contain millions of individual animals and weigh thousands of tons. These small, shrimp-like creatures, adults measuring about 2 inches long, are so abundant that their total biomass may exceed that of any other animal species on Earth. They feed on phytoplankton, filtering the microscopic cells from the water, and in turn become food for fish, seabirds, seals, and whales. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to exist on our planet, feeds almost exclusively on krill. An adult blue whale can measure over 100 feet in length and weigh more than 200 tons, heavier than any dinosaur, larger than any creature in the fossil record. Despite this immense size, blue whales are filter feeders, taking enormous gulps of water filled with krill, then forcing the water out through baleen plates that trap the tiny crustaceans inside. A single blue whale can consume up to 6 tons of krill per day during the feeding season, filtering the ocean like a living sieve, transforming countless tiny organisms into the mass of the largest creature Earth has ever produced. Blue whales were hunted nearly to extinction in the 20th century. In the Pacific alone, whaling fleets killed tens of thousands between the 1900s and 1960s, reducing their population to perhaps 1% of pre-whaling numbers. Today, they are slowly recovering, their populations growing under international protection, their songs, low-frequency calls that can travel hundreds of miles through the ocean, once again echoing through the Pacific depths. These calls, some of the loudest sounds produced by any animal, reaching 188 decibels, serve to communicate across vast distances, allowing whales separated by hundreds of miles to remain in acoustic contact, sharing information about feeding areas, potential mates, and the location of their dispersed population. But the Pacific's abundance is not uniformly distributed. Much of the open ocean, particularly in the subtropical gyres, is relatively barren. so lacking in nutrients that it has been called an oceanic desert. The water there is remarkably clear, a deep transparent blue that can extend hundreds of feet in depth, precisely because it contains so little life. Phytoplankton require not just sunlight and carbon dioxide, but also nutrients, particularly nitrogen, phosphorus, and iron. In the stable waters of the Gies, these nutrients are scarce, having long since been consumed and then sunk to the deep in the form of dead organisms and waste. The most productive regions of the Pacific are where nutrient-rich deep water rises to the surface through upwelling, along the coasts of California, Peru, and Chile, where winds push surface water away from shore and deep water rises to replace it. In the equatorial Pacific, where trade winds and the Earth's rotation create upwelling along the equator, and in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, where the circumpolar current brings nutrients from the deep. These upwelling zones, though they represent only a small fraction of the Pacific's total area, support the majority of its fish populations and marine life. The Pacific produces approximately 60% of the world's total fish catch, roughly 54 million tons per year. The waters off Peru alone, nourished by the cold, nutrient-rich Humboldt Current, produce enormous quantities of anchoveta, small fish that form the basis of one of the world's largest fisheries. In good years, millions of tons of anchoveta are harvested, most processed into fish meal and fish oil used in aquaculture and livestock feed. This single species, thriving in the upwelling waters of the eastern Pacific, helps feed fish farms and animal operations around the world, making the productivity of this small region essential to global food security. Yet the Pacific's ecosystems are changing. The ocean has absorbed approximately 30% of all the carbon dioxide that humans have released into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution. This co-dissolves in seawater, forming carbonic acid and lowering the ocean's pH in a process called ocean acidification. Since pre-industrial times, the Pacific's pH has dropped by approximately 0.1 units. A change that seems small but represents a 30% increase in acidity because pH is measured on a logarithmic scale. This acidification affects organisms that build shells or skeletons from calcium carbonate, including coral, mollusks, and many types of plankton. In more acidic water, calcium carbonate dissolves more readily and is harder for organisms to precipitate and build into shells. Scientists have already observed that some pteropods, tiny swimming snails that form a crucial part of the Pacific food web, show shell dissolution in regions where acidification is most pronounced. If acidification continues, it could fundamentally alter the base of the marine food web, with cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. The Pacific is also warming. Global ocean temperatures have increased by approximately 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900, with the Pacific showing similar trends. This may seem like a small change, but ocean ecosystems are exquisitely sensitive to temperature. Coral reefs, among the most diverse ecosystems on Earth, are particularly vulnerable. When water temperatures rise just 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit above normal summer maximums, corals expel the symbiotic algae that live in their tissues and provide them with food through photosynthesis. Without these algae, the corals turn white, a phenomenon called bleaching, and if conditions don't improve quickly, they starve. The Pacific has witnessed several major bleaching events in recent decades, including a global event in 2016 that affected coral reefs from the Great Barrier Reef to the islands of Micronesia to the reefs of the eastern Pacific. Some reefs lost more than half their coral cover. While corals can recover if temperatures return to normal and they are not subjected to additional stresses, repeated bleaching events can fundamentally transform reef ecosystems, replacing coral-dominated communities with algae-dominated ones, reducing the habitat available for the countless fish and invertebrates that depend on the complex three-dimensional structure that living coral provides. Yet even in the face of these changes, the Pacific displays remarkable resilience. In 2012, scientists discovered that after decades of protection, the coral reefs around the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, the Papahanaumokia Marine National Monument, had recovered to near-pristine condition, with some of the highest coral cover and fish biomass of any reefs in the Pacific. These reefs, protected from fishing and human disturbance, demonstrated that when given a chance, marine ecosystems can heal, can restore themselves to abundance and diversity. Similarly, populations of some whale species are recovering after being protected from hunting. Humpback whales, which migrate through the Pacific between feeding grounds in Alaska and breeding grounds in Hawaii and other tropical waters, have increased from a low of approximately 1,400 individuals in the 1960s to more than 21,000 today in the North Pacific alone. Their recovery is one of conservation's great success stories, proof that even species pushed to the brink can return if we provide them the protection and space they need. The Pacific reminds us that we are part of something vast and interconnected, that the oxygen we breathe comes from microscopic cells drifting in distant waters, that the fish on our plates depend on upwelling currents shaped by wind and Earth's rotation, that the largest animals ever to exist feed on some of the smallest, that changes in atmospheric chemistry ripple through marine food webs, that everything is connected to everything else in ways both obvious and subtle. And it reminds us, too, of resilience, of the ocean's capacity to heal when given the opportunity, of populations that can recover, of ecosystems that can restore themselves. The Pacific has endured for hundreds of millions of years, has weathered ice ages and warm periods, has absorbed asteroids and adjusted to shifting continents, and through it all, life has persisted, adapted, flourished. As you drift now into the deepest rest, imagine yourself part of this great system, not separate from the ocean, but connected to it, your breath linked to phytoplankton photosynthesis, your body composed of elements that have cycled through countless organisms, your existence part of the same story that includes whales and krill, coral and plankton, trenches and volcanoes, currents that circle the world and migrations that span hemispheres. You are floating now in warm, gentle waters, the Pacific cradling you as it has cradled life for eons beyond counting. The rhythm of waves becomes the rhythm of your breathing, slow and steady and peaceful. The vastness of the ocean reflects the vastness of rest that awaits you, deep and renewing and complete. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. Like the phytoplankton drifting in the current, like the whales resting between dives, like the ocean itself in its moments of perfect calm, you simply exist, suspended between surface and depth, between waking and sleeping, held safely in the embrace of the largest ocean, the deepest peace. And as the last light fades from the surface, as the stars emerge overhead to mirror the bioluminescence glowing softly in the depths below, you release your hold on consciousness and slip gently, gratefully, into the welcoming darkness of sleep. The Pacific abides, patient and eternal, its waves continuing their ancient rhythm, its currents flowing in their timeless paths, its life renewing itself season after season, as it has for hundreds of millions of years, as it will for hundreds of millions more. Rest now, in the knowledge that you are part of this magnificence, this great living system, this ocean that covers nearly half our world and cradles the story of life itself. Sleep and dream of endless blue horizons, of depths that hold mysteries still waiting to be discovered, of a planet that is more water than land, more connected than divided, more wondrous than we can fully comprehend. Sleep.